is this massive sarcophagus carved from one piece of limestone. And on top of this sarcophagus is this magnificent lid with these expertly carved images of a king. Along this edge, by the way, which is covered with cinnabar, this red stuff, is poisoned to the touch to keep looters from coming in here and ruining it. And by the way, if the ancient Egyptians might have used this, we might have had more antiquities coming out of that country today. But along this edge is the image of a shield. And up in the sanctuary is another image of a shield. And the ancient Maya word for shield is Tikal. So Alberto Rus had discovered the tomb of the most important Maya king, Tikal the Great.
Tikal's ascension to the throne in 615 AD came during the most critical time for Palenque. With no direct heir, the elders of Palenque had turned to an outsider, a royal who lived outside the kingdom, named Lady Sakkuk. Now she returned to Palenque with her adolescent son, Tikal. The future of Palenque hung in the balance as the young boy was crowned king by his mother. He was just 12 years old.
She sort of kept the throne warm for him for over 10 years while he was growing up.
As the young king grew into adulthood, Tikal had to deify himself to legitimize his rule. He declared his mother to be the living embodiment of the first mother, who created humans and the gods. He then was the son of a goddess, an exalted position that removed any question of his legitimacy.
He was almost certainly a charismatic fellow. He had to have been. He had no power base. He had to do it almost on pure charisma and determination.
As a Johnny-come-lately, as someone who needs to prove himself, he's going to be as splashy as possible. And so he constructs the most gaudy buildings imaginable. He's establishing all sorts of new architectural patterns.
To authenticate his lineage, Tikal set off on a building spree to revitalize his battered kingdom. One of his first orders of business, the renovation and expansion of the royal palace, an impressive structure that sits in the heart of the main plaza. More than 70,000 square feet, the palace would become a maze of galleries, chambers, stairways, courtyards, and tunnels, and was designed to reflect his ideas of grandeur. At first, Tikal's architects, like those throughout the Maya world, employed what is called the corbelled vault to support their soaring structures.
Now, this was a pretty straightforward structure where a series of lines of stones of ever-decreasing height are laid on top of each other. So it forms really a kind of inverted V shape with a row of capstones along the top.
But the corbelled vault left something to be desired. This basic construction limited interior space and light and forced architects to build walls wider than even the space it enclosed. Driven by a determined king, Tikal's engineers now looked for solutions to this problem.
What the Palenque designers succeeded in doing was lightening the weight. They produced sort of honeycomb structures on the top of these buildings. They could make their spans wider, area, more light could come in.
These innovations reduced the stress on the load-bearing walls, creating a more open and inviting feel than the traditional Maya buildings. Over 60 years, Tikal's builders became the best in the New World. But it wasn't until the end of his rule that Tikal commissioned one of the most complex and imaginative projects ever attempted by the Maya, the Temple of the Inscriptions.
The discovery of the Temple of the Inscriptions changed all our ideas about Maya pyramids. They weren't supposed to be mortuary shrines.
Inside, along a stairway leading down to the tomb, engineers built a psychoduct, or hollow tube.
It's a conduit that allows someone on the top of the pyramid to speak into this speaking tube, and eventually you would be able to presumably communicate directly with Tikal in his tomb.
This 20-ton sarcophagus was built to last an eternity.
This actually had a lid which was rolled off to one side, and there was a cavity for his body to be put, so that when he eventually did die, the door was sealed and the stairway was blocked.
his architects and sculptors designed a coffin rich in symbolism, portraying the resurrection of Tikal in the afterworld. Royal scribes were ordered to draw a grid to accommodate 640 glyphs that would tell the story of Tikal's reign.
Many Maya pyramids don't leave much textual record on them. The opposite is the case in the temple, the inscriptions. Everything about it, from these huge tablets on the summit to the information inside, proclaims that this is the final resting place of the founder of one of the great Maya dynasties.
In 683, during Tikal's 68th year as king, the 12-year-old boy who grew to be one of the great Maya rulers died at the age of 80. He was covered in red cinnabar and adorned in lavish jewelry. A jade mask was placed over his face. Though the legacy of Tikal the Great would be hard to match, his son had been waiting on the sidelines for nearly 50 years. With the clock ticking, he would launch a series of building projects harnessing the laws of physics and Mother Nature.
In 1985, Tikal's burial mask was stolen from a museum in Mexico. Fortunately, 4 years later, the mask was recovered.
684 AD, the mighty King Tikal has engineered Palenque to be one of the finest Maya capitals ever known. After 68 years on the throne, his body is buried in a tomb that rivals those built for the Egyptian pharaohs. Now it is up to his son to build upon his father's legacy and cement his own reign. His name was Khan Balam.
Tikal was the founder of a dynasty, but his son was a great consolidator. He was someone that was going to make sure that that dynasty would continue.
The 48-year-old king immediately threw himself into an ambitious three-pyramid complex that would stand as his own monument for the ages.
He designed and constructed the cross group, one of the most intricate and beautiful groups of ceremonial temples ever constructed in the Maya world.
These are his memorial, and they tower above the palace. They look down on the works of his father. And in some ways, I think they represent a statement of individuality, that he himself is going to leave his imprint on the city, just as his father did.
He ordered his engineers to build three intricate structures: the Temple of the Cross, the Temple of the Foliated Cross, and the Temple of the Sun. Khan Balam's engineers would take a giant leap forward, using sophisticated geometric calculations unsurpassed anywhere in the world, based on the Maya's creation of a complete number system.
One of the many ways in which the Maya were ahead of their time was in their creation of what we would refer to as zero.
With a similar combination of a shell which represented zero or completion, and then a dot, number one, and then a 5. By just placing them in different positions, they were able to multiply, and reach incredible numbers.
The Greeks and Romans were tremendous engineers, theologians, historians, and so forth, but were very limited by their mathematical system because they didn't have a zero. So here you have the irony that they were able to produce great public works, philosophy, and whatnot, but were really pretty lousy mathematicians compared to the Maya.
Khan Balam's engineers' advanced mathematical observations may have included the discovery of proportions like the square roots of rectangles and something called the golden mean, a naturally occurring proportion that can be seen in animals, nature, and even the human body as 1 to 1.618.
Measure a person from his head to his belly button, and then from his belly button to his feet, you get a proportion very close to 1 to 1.618, the golden mean.
Some scholars believe this proportion has been appearing in structures for thousands of years at places like the pyramids of Giza in Egypt and the Parthenon in Greece. Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man is a study of this proportion, and some even say he painted the Mona Lisa using this ratio in her features. With nothing more than some sticks and a cord, Khan Balaam's engineers may have been able to measure the square roots of rectangles. In the Temple of the Cross, these shapes would be used to mark the two main piers of the facade, the width of the medial doorway and the interior walls. The golden ratio can be seen in the rear chambers and the base of the structure, with the side wall as 1 and the back wall as 1.618. By using repeated squares and natural proportions in the Temple of the Cross, a beautifully calculated floor plan took shape, full of geometry, mythological history, and a king's own legacy. But not all engineering in Palenque was done with an eye on the afterlife. Palenque's engineers also had to focus on more practical needs.
One of the names of Palenque is La Camha, which means place of great waters. We have 4 rivers running through Palenque year-round. We have dozens of springs. We have water everywhere.
These riches came with challenges. Palenque was surrounded by steep hills, natural springs and creeks that carved their way through the base of the site, leaving only bits and pieces of flat, water-free land for building.
Unlike most Maya cities, the problem facing Palenque wasn't how to store water for the dry season, it was how to deal with an overabundance of water. As you can see, everything is green here, it rains every day. So to meet this challenge, the city planners devised a unique way of diverting the pre-existing streams by building subterranean aqueducts that would channel the water underground, thus saving more land on top for cultivation. These tunnels were lined with limestone and they were covered with our old friend from Egypt and Greece, the corbelled vault. Series of protruding stones, one on top of the other, formed sort of an arch overhead. Now, these ceilings were so sturdy, they could support the massive weight of Palenque's giant plazas overhead. So the people were walking along with the water rushing underneath them, being diverted away from the city, just like it is where I live today in New York City.
What's even more impressive is that there are signs that Maya engineers may have figured out a way to create water pressure. They built water tunnels that ran through the rugged terrain into the city, often directed uphill. As they got closer to the main structures, the pipes got incrementally smaller. Like Roman fountains, the water pressure gained momentum as it coursed through increasingly narrower tunnels, eventually allowing for running water throughout Palenque's buildings.
We have beautiful systems of sweat baths and swimming pools and aqueduct. In its day, it would have rivaled any of the Roman aqueduct systems. We don't see this use of water pressure anywhere else, and it doesn't appear again until the Spanish bring the technologies with them.
Together, Khan Balaam and his father Tikal ruled Palenque for nearly 100 years, pushing Maya engineering to a level never seen before. The future seemed bright for this city on the rise. But its years of glory are about to come to a sudden end. Something is happening in the Maya world that will cause the classic city-states to implode.
The Maya had developed the concept of zero by the 4th century AD, but the Europeans wouldn't understand the concept until 800 years later.
By the 8th century, Palenque, Tikal, and the other kingdoms of the Maya world were expanding across the continent. Tall pyramids, unparalleled city planning, and sumptuous royal palaces advertised the glory of the great kings. Then, suddenly, these cities began to unravel, one after another. Royal sculptors stopped carving their monuments with historical information, and kings halted their construction projects. Maya civilization had plunged into darkness.
It's not that the entire Maya lowlands is abandoned overnight. It's that, one kingdom falls here and another one 10 years later falls over here, then another one over here.
The causes of the Maya collapse remains a great debate among scholars. We're really talking about a society that was pushing itself to the limit.